What would you do if the president of your neighborhood HOA pulled out a gun and shot your emotional support cat? This isn't fiction. This happened to me. And what did she say after? It'll leave you speechless. Stay with me, because this story doesn't just end in heartbreak. It ends in something much bigger. But before we dive in, if you care about justice, kindness, and standing up to bullies, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because this story, it's going to make your blood boil. The gunshot cracked through the afternoon like a thunderclap, followed by a long, aching silence. I remember the way Muffin's tiny body jolted midair, her soft gray fur catching the sunlight as she tumbled onto the pavement. I screamed. I didn't even realize it was me at first. It sounded like some wild animal being ripped in half. The woman standing across the lawn, HOA Board President Karen Langford, calmly lowered her silver pistol, tucked it back into her oversized purse, and adjusted her sunglasses like she'd just swatted a fly. "Pets like that aren't welcome here," she said flatly, turning away as if nothing had happened. I ran. I dropped to my knees beside Muffin, scooped her up, and felt the warmth already slipping from her. Her tiny paws twitched once, then went still. And just like that, my best friend, my emotional support animal, my safe place, my reason to wake up every day, was gone. What was I supposed to do? Call the cops? Go after her? Try to breathe when my chest felt like it was splitting in two? Because here's the thing, Muffin wasn't just a pet. She was prescribed by my therapist after the accident. The accident that had taken my dad. And nearly taken me too. But none of that mattered to Karen. And the worst part? This wasn't some sudden act. No. Looking back now, I think she planned it. But before all this, before the screaming and the sirens and the media vans, we were just trying to rebuild a quiet life. It started a few months earlier, on a spring morning that smelled like lilacs and fresh-cut grass. I moved into Maple Ridge Estates in March. It was one of those neatly trimmed, slightly too perfect suburban neighborhoods outside Dallas. The kind where everyone's grass is exactly 3 inches high, the mailboxes match, and there's an HOA pamphlet in every welcome basket, right next to the sugar cookies no one really eats. Mom had passed 2 years prior. It had been just me and Dad since then. Then the crash happened on Highway 45, some drunk driver ran a red light. I survived, barely. Dad didn't. After months in the hospital, my therapist suggested I try relocating. Somewhere quieter. I had trouble being around people. Trouble sleeping. Trouble. Everything. That's when Dr. Rickerson recommended a support animal. I got Muffin from a local rescue shelter. She was small and nervous, like me. But something about her calmed my breathing. We clicked. Moving to Maple Ridge was supposed to be a fresh start. The house was modest, but it had a fenced backyard and big windows, perfect for Muffin to sunbathe. At first, things were peaceful. The neighbors waved but didn't pry. I didn't go out much except for walks with Muffin or quick runs to the grocery store. And then came Karen. She lived across the street. Short hair, a stiff posture, and a clipboard that looked permanently attached to her hand. Her porch was covered in signs, "No soliciting," "Neighborhood Watch Captain," and "Proud to enforce HOA regulations." The first time she spoke to me, she wasn't even looking at me. Just at the edge of my lawn. "Your trash bins were out past 7 p.m. yesterday. That's against Section 2.3. Her voice was flat, like reading from a script. I apologized, even though it was barely 7:05. That's just who I was back then, always trying to keep the peace. Karen stared down at Muffin, who was peeking out from behind my legs. "I hope that cat doesn't roam," she added sharply. "We don't allow wandering animals in this neighborhood." "She doesn't. She's registered as an emotional support animal," I replied gently. Karen raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't mean anything to the HOA." She turned and walked away without waiting for a response. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Karen just seemed like one of those people who got a little too into rules. Annoying, sure, but not dangerous. Over the next few weeks, little things began happening. First, a warning letter in my mailbox. Apparently, Muffin being in the front window was a visual nuisance. Then someone accidentally left a slice of poisoned meat on my porch. I caught it in time. Muffin sniffed it but didn't eat it. I reported it to the HOA. The reply? "We will remind all homeowners to properly dispose of food waste." That was it. Next came the sprinklers. Karen reported me for overwatering, though I hadn't touched the settings. It turned out someone had tampered with the controls while I was out. When I asked to see camera footage, Karen claimed her cameras were under maintenance. I started to grow paranoid. I didn't sleep much. I kept all the windows locked. I even began carrying Muffin in a little carrier when I went outside, just to be safe. But despite everything, Muffin kept me grounded. On the nights I cried, she curled up beside me, purring softly until my breathing slowed. She was more than a pet. She was medicine. And then, one Saturday, I let my guard down. It was a warm morning. I was tending to the flower bed by the side gate. The sun was out. Muffin liked to sit near me while I worked. She never wandered far. That's when I heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel. I looked up. Karen was standing just beyond the fence. And in her hand was a gun. I froze. Everything after that felt like a blur, a loud bang, my scream, and Karen's cold voice ringing in my ears. Now, as I sat on the front steps cradling Muffin's lifeless body, the whole world felt still. Like it had stopped spinning. My hands were shaking. My heart felt like it had been ripped open. I couldn't move. Sirens hadn't come. Neighbors hadn't rushed over. No one screamed or shouted. It was like no one had seen, or maybe no one wanted to. Then a shadow moved on the sidewalk. It was someone I hadn't expected to see. And what they were holding in their hand made my breath catch. It was Mrs. Penelope Marsh, the retired librarian who lived 2 houses down. Quiet always wore a hat with a giant fabric flower and watered her tulips every morning at 7 a.m. She rarely spoke more than a sentence at a time. But now, she was clutching something close to her chest, a small, black object with a red blinking light. A camera. I saw everything, she said softly, her voice trembling. She aimed. And she fired. That woman, she shot the cat. I blinked at her, trying to make sense of the words. You caught it on video? She nodded once. I was just filming the hummingbirds when I saw her walk up to your fence. I didn't think I didn't know she'd actually. Her voice cracked, and she looked down, eyes glassy with guilt. I wanted to grab the camera from her and sprint to the nearest police station, but I also didn't want to scare her off. Mrs. Marsh had always seemed nervous, like someone who knew what fear was and had learned to hide behind books and closed blinds. Can I see it?" I asked gently. She nodded again and slowly handed it over. The footage was shaky but clear enough. You could see Karen approaching. You could see Muffin sitting on the pavement, doing nothing but blinking up at the morning light. Then Karen lifted her arm. And the frame jumped at the sound of the shot. I paused it. My hands were damp. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," Mrs. Marsh whispered. "I was scared she'd come after me next." That single sentence made something snap inside me. This woman wasn't just a rule enforcer. She wasn't just nosy or mean. Karen was a bully, and now a killer, who had built a kingdom out of fear. "I'm going to the police," I said, standing up, Muffin still wrapped in the old towel from my porch swing. "And you're coming with me." Mrs. Marsh hesitated, then took a shaky breath and nodded. We drove to the station in silence. The radio was off. The air was thick with things we weren't saying. I held Muffin close. Even lifeless, she felt like home. When we got there, I explained everything. The officer at the front desk raised his eyebrows when I mentioned the HOA and the gun. But when Mrs. Marsh handed over the footage, everything changed. They brought in a detective. They asked us to write statements. They asked to keep the camera. It was the first moment since the shot was fired that I felt like maybe justice was possible. But Maple Ridge wasn't ready to give up its queen so easily. By the time I got home, a warning letter was already taped to my door. Unapproved lawn alteration, violation number 324. Apparently, my overturned flower pots, from when I dropped everything and ran to Muffin, counted as a visual infraction. But this wasn't just about petty notices anymore. The next morning, I got a call from Officer Talbot, the detective assigned to my case. "We're reviewing the footage," he said cautiously, "but there are complications." "Complications?" I asked, heart sinking. The HOA lawyer's already been in touch. They're arguing it was self-defense. I nearly dropped the phone. Self-defense? Against a 6-pound cat? "I know," he said. "But she's claiming the cat was aggressive and posed a threat. She also says she warned you multiple times. She poisoned her. She stalked her. I believe you," he said calmly. "But Karen Langford is connected. Deep pockets. A lot of friends in high places. We're going to need more than just this video if we want charges to stick." I hung up, my stomach twisting. I wanted to scream. But what good would that do? Muffin was gone. And the woman who took her from me was walking around, smug as ever. I thought that would be the worst of it. But 2 days later, I opened my mailbox and found something else. A formal notice from the HOA board. You are hereby summoned to appear before the Maple Ridge Disciplinary Committee on allegations of violating community animal policies and fostering a disruptive environment. They were putting me on trial. I stood on my porch, the letter shaking in my hands, when a familiar voice called out from behind the bushes. "Hey, don't let them scare you." It was Jay. Jay Rivera, the handyman with a crooked smile who fixed fences and mowed lawns for half the neighborhood. I barely knew him, just a wave here and there. But now, he stepped forward with a firm look in his eye. "I heard what happened," he said. "And I'm not the only one. People are talking." "What kind of talking?" I asked. "Some think she went too far. Others are scared to say anything. But a few of us, we've had enough." He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket. "This is a petition. To remove her from the board. I've got 9 signatures. I need 30. I stared at him. "You'd really do that?" He nodded. "She's ruled this place like a tyrant for years. Maybe it took something this horrible for people to finally open their eyes." A flicker of something returned to my chest. Not quite hope, but close. Maybe this wasn't over yet. But before I could say another word, we both heard the loud crunch of tires rolling over the curb. Karen's SUV. She parked half on my grass and got out like she owned the place, her eyes cold and furious. She stormed toward us, her phone already recording. "You are trespassing," she barked at Jay. "I'll have your license revoked, you lowlife." And then, right there in front of us, she reached into her bag again. Not for her phone. Not for a letter. But for the same silver pistol. And this time, she wasn't pointing it at Muffin. Jay didn't flinch. He didn't move an inch. But I did. I stepped between them before I even knew what I was doing. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. "Put it down, Karen," I shouted, my voice trembling but sharp. "Put the gun down." Her face twisted into something cold and cruel. "You think I'm scared of you too? You don't belong here. Neither of you. You're both a threat to this neighborhood." She kept the gun raised, one hand trembling slightly, her mouth curling in disgust like she couldn't believe we dared stand on the same street as her. "You let that filthy animal run loose," she spat at me. "You encourage disobedience. You're breeding chaos." Jay slowly raised both hands, palms open. "Nobody's threatening you, Ms. Langford. Let's just talk, all right? You're making this worse." Karen's eyes darted to the window across the street. Mrs. Marsh. She was there again. Standing just behind her curtains. Watching. Then something unexpected happened. A voice rang out. "Drop IT, Karen. Right now." It was Officer Talbot, stepping out of an unmarked car parked at the end of the block. His gun was drawn. A second officer appeared at his side, walking slowly with his hand on his holster. Karen froze. For a moment, the only sound on the street was the wind rustling through the hedges and the distant thud of a basketball from a few houses over. Then, slowly, she lowered the weapon. "Place it on the ground and step back," Talbot said firmly. She hesitated. Then she sneered and dropped it with a hard clang onto the pavement, backing away with her hands raised. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "All this over a cat. An animal." Talbot cuffed her without a word. As they led her toward the cruiser, neighbors began to emerge. Doors creaked open. Curtains moved. A few people wandered to the end of their driveways. Mrs. Marsh stepped out too, holding a notepad. "I wrote everything she said," she called out. And then, just as the cruiser door slammed shut behind Karen, a man I hadn't seen before stepped up from behind the crowd. He was tall and well-dressed, with a leather portfolio in one hand and a quiet confidence in his step. "Excuse me," he said, approaching me and Jay. "I'm Thomas Grant. I'm with the Texas Disability Law Center. We saw your story on the local blog. And I'd like to offer my help." I blinked at him. "You saw? But I haven't." He smiled gently. "Someone submitted your story anonymously. The incident with your emotional support animal. The HOA harassment. This is a civil rights violation. And we'd like to take it to court." My throat went dry. Jay looked at me, eyes wide. For a second, I didn't know what to say. But then, Behind Mr. Grant, I noticed a few more neighbors stepping closer. A woman with a baby on her hip. A teenage boy with earbuds still hanging from one ear. Mr. Johnston from the corner house. All of them silent, watching. And then, someone said, "We'll testify." Another voice, "She tried to ban my son's therapy dog." Then another, "She fined us for leaving a birthday balloon tied to the mailbox." One by one, they began to speak up. It was like a dam had broken. For years, Karen had ruled Maple Ridge through silence and fear. But now, with the sun shining down on that silver gun still lying in the street, the silence was gone. Still, nothing was certain. She hadn't even been officially charged yet. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't going to be easy. HOAs had money, lawyers, influence. But I had Muffin's memory. And now, I wasn't alone. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I walked into the backyard where Muffin used to nap by the flower pots, the moonlight casting long shadows across the grass. I sat down on the old bench, pulled my hoodie tighter, and let myself remember. The way she used to chase bees she'd never catch. The way she would always press her nose against the glass door when I got home, like she'd been waiting for me all day. "I miss you," I whispered. A quiet meow broke the silence. I turned. There, at the edge of the fence, was a small, trembling kitten. White with patches of gray. Eyes wide and unsure. She looked almost scared. I stood slowly, crouched down, and held out my hand. She didn't run. She crept forward. And just as her little paw reached mine, I heard a sudden loud bang at the front of the house. Not a gunshot. Glass breaking. Jay's voice rang out from the side of the house. "Hey! What the hell?" I rushed around the corner, heart in my throat. And stopped cold. My living room window was shattered. And painted across the glass, in dripping red spray paint, were 5 words. "You think this is over?" Jay sprinted past me into the yard, flashlight already in hand, scanning the shadows. "Stay back," he called out. Whoever it was might still be close. But I couldn't move. My feet were planted in the grass, eyes locked on the glass shards glittering on my floor, on those 5 words, written like a threat from a horror movie. "You think this is over?" Someone had done this deliberately. And something deep inside me whispered, this wasn't just some random act of vandalism. This was connected to Karen. It had to be. Minutes later, police arrived. Officer Talbot showed up again, brows furrowed, jaw tight. "Looks like a message," he said grimly, after walking the perimeter. "No signs of forced entry otherwise. Just the smashed window and spray paint." Jay shook his head, pacing. "That window's not cheap. And it's not random. This was a warning. They took prints. Asked me if I had enemies. I just looked at the officer and pointed to the house across the street. Karen's porch was dark now, the same flag still fluttering over the railing. But her shadow felt bigger than ever. "I thought she was in custody," I muttered. "She is," Talbot replied. "We booked her yesterday for animal cruelty and brandishing a weapon. But she made bail. Her attorney moved fast. She's out." Of course she was. "She did this," I said quietly. Talbot glanced at me. "Could be. But she's not the only one who liked her style. We've gotten complaints about her little circle for years. One guy, George Wilkins, threatened to sue over a lawn gnome. They laughed him out of here." Jay turned to me. "She's not acting alone. She's got followers. People who think rules are more important than people. They're still watching." I looked down the street. Every house looked the same, manicured lawns, porch lights glowing soft yellow. But behind the curtains, who knew who was watching? Who was listening? Who still believed Karen was right? The next morning, I found a dead bird on my doorstep. Its neck had been twisted. That was when I knew, this wasn't just about Muffin anymore. This was about control. About fear. About me daring to stand up. But something inside me had changed too. Something hard and quiet. I didn't cry. I called the news. They came within the hour. A local station first, KTXH. Then another. And another. Soon, there were microphones in my driveway, journalists asking questions, and Jay helping me answer them one by one. I told them everything. About Muffin. About the warnings. About the camera footage. About Karen. And about the spray paint still smeared across my living room window. They aired the story that night. They showed Muffin's picture, her curled in a sunbeam, her soft gray fur. They showed the shattered glass. The response was immediate. Hundreds of comments flooded in. I've dealt with HOA bullies like this too. She murdered a support animal. That's not a rule, that's evil. You're brave for standing up. Don't back down. For the first time since the shot, I felt something real, the quiet roar of strangers standing behind me. People who had lost pets, been bullied by HOAs, or just believed in something better. But not everyone was supportive. That night, I got my first anonymous letter. Typed. No return address. Stop before someone gets hurt. Muffin was just the start. I showed it to Talbot. He took it seriously. This is escalating. I'll file for a protective order. You need cameras. More than one. Jay installed them that same afternoon. Front and back. Porch and yard. We were done playing defense. But while we were drilling cameras into siding, I noticed something odd. A car I hadn't seen before. Sitting 2 houses down. Black sedan. Tinted windows. No HOA sticker. It didn't move for 3 hours. I took a picture. That night, it was gone. And the next morning, someone had torn the camera off the back fence. We found it shattered in the flower bed. Whoever was doing this, they were watching, too. But they weren't just trying to scare me anymore. They were preparing for something bigger. Jay stayed over the next few nights. Said it was just in case. We didn't talk much, just kept the lights on, drank too much coffee, and listened for every creak on the porch. And then came the letter that made my blood run cold. Not from the HOA. Not from the police. But from the court. Karen Langford was suing me. Defamation. Emotional distress. Loss of reputation. She was claiming the footage was doctored, that the cat lunged at her, and that I was waging a public harassment campaign against her and the HOA. And somehow, she was trying to use me as a weapon against my own story. She's trying to flip this, Jay muttered, tossing the paperwork on the table. She's going to drag this out for months. Cost you everything. I stared at the wall, silent. This wasn't just a threat anymore. It was war. But I wasn't backing down. I had Muffin's ashes in a tiny velvet box beside my bed. I had a neighborhood full of silenced people watching what I'd do next. And now, I had a lawsuit that could bury me if I didn't fight back. The next morning, I put on real clothes, tied my hair back, and walked into the HOA office with a folder in my hands. Karen wasn't there. But her assistant, Melinda, was. Melinda, with her perfect nails and her fake smile. She looked up. Can I help you? I opened the folder. Inside was a signed petition, now with 38 names. Neighbors. Quiet ones. Loud ones. People who'd all had enough. This is a request to remove Karen Langford from the HOA board, I said clearly. Effective immediately. Melinda blinked, her smirk twitching. That's not how it works. It is now. And just then, as she opened her mouth to argue, her office window exploded with a deafening crash. Someone had thrown a brick through the glass. Wrapped in a note. Jay lunged forward and grabbed it before Melinda could. He opened the paper. It said only 3 words. She dies next. The entire room froze. Jay stared at the note, his jaw tightening as he passed it to me. The paper was thin and wrinkled, like it had been clenched in a sweaty fist. The message was typed in bold, all caps, with no signature. Just those 3 chilling words. She dies next. Melinda backed up slowly from her desk, her face as pale as a sheet. This has gone too far, she whispered. This is beyond HOA business now. Jay walked to the broken window and peeked outside. The street looked normal. The same trimmed hedges. Same garden gnomes. But whoever threw that brick was gone. I handed the note to Officer Talbot within the hour. He didn't hesitate this time. This is an explicit death threat, he said. You're not just a target, you're being hunted. I was assigned a patrol unit to circle my street every night. Talbot also pulled a few favors and got me a temporary restraining order against Karen and any affiliated HOA member. Still, the pressure was building like a storm about to break open. Karen's lawsuit wasn't going away. And now, someone, maybe more than one person, wanted me gone. You need a lawyer, Jay said one evening as we sat in the backyard, the new kitten curled on my lap. I had named her Ash, after the soft gray marks on her ears and her quiet, observant nature. I can't afford one, I said softly. Karen's got a legal army. I've got muffins and a broken window. But Jay already had a card in his hand. This guy, David Rourke. He's with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. I told him your story. He's willing to help pro bono. I took the card, my fingers trembling. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then I nodded. Okay. Let's fight. Mr. Rourke was a firecracker. Gray-streaked hair, sharp eyes, and a voice like gravel in a blender. Within a week, he filed a counterclaim, harassment, emotional damages, and wrongful death of a federally protected support animal. That changed everything. Karen's lawyers backed off, slightly. The news picked it up again. More neighbors came forward. Stories poured in. One woman had her teenage son's ADHD therapy dog banned from walking through the community park. Another said Karen once fined her $500 for having a wreath on her front door for too long after the holiday. But still, something wasn't right. Because every time we thought we were making progress, another strange thing would happen. Jay's tires were slashed one morning. I got a dead fish in my mailbox. Ash went missing for 2 whole hours. I found her crying under the porch with a red ribbon tied around her neck, just like Muffin used to wear. It was like someone was trying to get inside my head. Piece by piece. Fear by fear. Then came the town hall. The HOA was holding an emergency community meeting to address rising tensions and false accusations against our leadership, the flyer read. I wasn't invited. But I showed up anyway. Jay came with me. So did Mrs. Marsh. And so did over 20 other neighbors who had signed the petition. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, the same room where they hosted Easter brunch and cookie swaps. That night, it felt like a battlefield. Folding chairs lined up in rows. Karen stood at the front, hands clasped, dressed in her usual navy blue blazer like she was running for mayor. I have dedicated the last 12 years of my life to preserving the safety and dignity of this neighborhood, she began, her voice smooth like syrup but with a bite. And in recent weeks, I have been the victim of vicious lies and personal attacks. Lies? I interrupted, stepping forward. You shot my support cat. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed. That video was edited, she snapped. I have already filed a formal defamation. I took a deep breath and held up a new folder. 38 signatures. Petition for your removal. Every one of them is from someone you've fined, bullied, or harassed. You're not protecting this neighborhood. You're terrorizing it. The room erupted. Voices rose. People stood. One by one, they started speaking. She made me repaint my door because the shade was too cheerful. She called code enforcement on my disabled father for leaving his walker outside. She told my kid he couldn't skateboard on our own driveway. Karen's face turned red, her mouth trembling with rage. Melinda tried to speak. Let's keep this civil. But then the power cut out. Total black. A woman screamed. Someone dropped a glass. I felt a hand on my arm. Jay. Stay close, he said. Seconds later, emergency lights flickered on. But the front door was wide open. And Karen was gone. I ran out into the night. No sound. No footsteps. Only the wind. And then I saw it. The black sedan. Parked again at the edge of the lot. I ran toward it, heart in my throat. Jay yelled for me to stop, but I didn't. I yanked the driver's door open. But no one was inside. Just a single item on the front seat. A printed photo. Of me. Sleeping. In my own bed. I dropped the photo like it burned my fingers. Jay caught up just as I staggered back from the car. What is it? He asked. I couldn't speak. I just pointed. He picked up the photo, stared for a beat, then whispered, "They've been inside your house." That realization hit me harder than anything else. Not the lawsuit. Not the threats. Not even the loss of Muffin. Someone had stood over me while I slept. Taken a picture. Printed it out. And left it like a message. This wasn't just about scaring me anymore. It was about control. Total, terrifying control. Jay slammed the door shut and scanned the lot. "We call Talbot now," he said. "And we don't stay in your house tonight." I nodded slowly, my heart hammering in my ears. Back at home, Officer Talbot arrived within minutes. He took the photo, checked the locks, and swept the place again, but there were no signs of forced entry. Whoever did this had access, he said grimly. They had time. They had keys. Karen, I whispered. But Talbot shook his head. Karen's missing. Her lawyer hasn't heard from her since yesterday. She didn't show up to her own legal meeting this morning. No calls. No texts. We just put out a missing person alert an hour ago. I stared at him. She disappeared? He nodded. And I don't think it's voluntary. That night, Jay and I stayed at his cousin's place across town. I couldn't sleep. Not really. Every creak made me jump. Every time the heater kicked on, I reached for Ash, who curled up on my chest like a living heartbeat. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Against every instinct in my body, I answered. At first, nothing. Just static. Then, a woman's voice. Hoarse. Slurred. She thought she ran the HOA, the voice rasped. But some of us. We've been running her. The line cut off. I stared at the phone. This isn't just about Karen, I said slowly. Jay sat up. What do you mean? She wasn't acting alone. She never was. They were using her. Jay's eyes narrowed. Who? The answer came the next morning. When a new letter arrived. Not through the mailbox. Slid under the door of Jay's cousin's apartment. Which meant whoever it was. They followed us here. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Centered. No name. Drop the lawsuit. Leave Maple Ridge. Or we'll finish what we started. Next time, it won't be the cat. Underneath the message was a photo. Karen. Tied to a chair. Eyes wide with fear. Mouth duct-taped. Behind her, a wall covered in HOA rules, splattered with something dark. I nearly threw up. Jay called Talbot. The police launched a manhunt. Local news exploded with headlines. HOA president abducted in escalating suburban feud. But this wasn't just suburban anymore. It was criminal. It was organized. And someone had declared war. Talbot met us the next afternoon. We believe a rogue faction within the HOA had been acting as a shadow council, he said. They used Karen as a public face, made her enforce their rules, absorb the hate, and do their dirty work. But now that she's exposed, she's expendable. I shook my head in disbelief. This is real? This sounds like something from a movie. It's real, he said flatly. And if you don't back down, they'll come for you next. But something inside me hardened. No, I said. They already took Muffin. I'm not leaving. Jay turned to me, eyes intense. Then we end this. We went public again. Press conferences. More interviews. Photos of Karen in captivity blurred on the evening news. Petition signatures skyrocketed. A federal task force got involved. A quiet suburban HOA scandal had turned into a national headline. Then, 1 week later, a break. Karen was found. Alive. Duct taped to a chair in an abandoned storm shelter just outside of town. Disoriented. Shaking. Covered in bruises. The ones responsible? 3 men. All residents of Maple Ridge. All former board members of the original HOA were removed years ago for aggressive enforcement tactics. They called themselves the Keepers. Their motto? Order above all. They had been pulling strings for years, using threats and intimidation to keep the community clean. When Karen tried to quit, after Muffin's death, they silenced her. Their plan was to make me disappear next. But we got to them first. All 3 were arrested. Charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, harassment, and multiple federal violations. Karen, once the queen of cruelty, sat across from me weeks later at a public hearing. She looked hollow. Empty. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. You pulled the trigger, I said. You started it. She didn't respond. Her silence was her confession. The HOA was disbanded. Every one of their bylaws was erased. New leadership was voted in, democratically, peacefully. Jay became president of the new community council. Mrs. Marsh brought cookies to the first meeting. And me? I stayed. I planted sunflowers in the front yard. Ash got her own nameplate on the mailbox. And every year, on the day Muffin died, I place her favorite toy, a little felt mouse, at the edge of the garden. To remember. To honor. To remind anyone watching, you can threaten me. You can scare me. But you can't make me leave. Because this is my home now. And no one tells me what I can or cannot love. Not a neighbor. Not a board. Not even a Karen with a gun. She thought she could silence me. She thought the rules would protect her. But justice didn't just knock. It kicked the door down. And if you've ever lost something, or someone, you love, I hope this story reminded you, you are not alone. If this video moved you, please share it, comment below with your experience, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that matter. Because together, we make sure stories like muffins aren't forgotten. Thank you for watching. And remember, love always wins. Even when it hurts.